Yard, and I'm pumped. I'm excited.
I am too. It's Thursday night.
It's Thursday night.
Thursday night.
And you're in the chair you're supposed to be in, even though nobody knows your name. Who are you anyway?
Oh, I'm Dr. Angel.
You're Dr. Angel, and I'm Mama Mac, and we are glad to have you all joining us tonight on Go Yard. We are in our 7th year.
We are.
I mean, it's plain crazy.
We've had a lot. We're having a lot of fun with this.
We are?
I think we are.
Oh, you are?
I'm having a lot of fun. And you pick on me a lot, so I think you're having a lot of fun too.
Oh, no, see, Tommy, the engineer, he tells me, pick on Angel. Be sure you pick on Angel.
It's fun for everybody.
Right, yeah, that's what it is.
I'm an easy target.
Yeah, so, a little conflict here. Since we're going to talk about conflict tonight, let's have a little conflict.
Let's have a little one.
All right, we in the last 3 weeks have been in a series entitled Using Your Words. What's that mean?
Well, using our words is just what it sounds like, using our words. So communicating clearly what we want, what we need, what we think, what we feel, like communicating it.
Like what we say to our 3-year-olds and our 2-year-olds who are learning to talk.
We sure do.
Use your words.
Use your words. Like, we can't help them with their problem unless we know what they want or what they need. And so otherwise we're doing all kinds of stuff, right? And we're feeling overwhelmed. Well, as we become adults, we start kind of just thinking people can read our minds, or they should know what we want.
Know,
if they
right?
loved me, they would know what I want, or what I
exactly.
need, or what I'm thinking, or...
And usually people do not.
They usually have no
really
clue.
don't know.
No clue.
So this is the part 4, and the last part of this series. And it's going to be more intense tonight, so get ready, take some notes if you want. The first week, we just talked in general about using your words. Then we talked about handling kids, discussion with teens in particular. So that one would have been 2 weeks ago. So you can go back and check that out. 3 weeks ago, I don't know, something like that. So, and then we talked last week about those relationships that are personal relationships, marriages, whatever.
Right,
people that
family,
are
friends.
partnerships, whatever they are. So this week we're talking about handling conflict.
Yes.
Because none of us ever have any conflict in our lives to have to learn how to handle it, right?
Not at all. Never.
Not at all.
Yeah, I think conflict is probably it is one of those top things that bring people into the counseling room.
It is.
Some kind of conflict and some kind of relationship in their life.
Which really works well that we have a show like this and you're a counselor.
It does work well.
Doesn't it? So Dr. Angel is 1.5 years already into private practice. And you can go to drangelsdevelopment.com and find out all about it and actually set up appointments. We also are live right now on Facebook, on your page and mine, I assume.
Yes.
Okay. And so if you have a question or a comment during the show while we're live or even later, we sometimes check later, but it's better if you have a question or comment, do it now while we're live. And we'll be happy to try to add that in. Or you can call, and the number is right here in front. It's 727-441-3000. You can call in with your questions or your comments, and sometimes people do.
Yes, they do.
And that is fine. We'd love to have you engage with us on this topic, using your words. The other thing is that we've done this whole year. Been working with our webmaster today to update our Go Yard website, which is goyard2014.org. It's an ORG, right? And so we did like 3-4 months of COVID shows this year. They are here on tantalknetwork.com. Go to the podcast tab and go to Go Yard, the name of the show, if you would like to hear any of those. But we've also put some of the shows from this year on our website. They will be on our website here just in a few days. So anyway, we're trying to catch things up, but it's a good way for people. And we're on YouTube Live right now.
Yes, we are.
So
we're all over the place.
You can, after a show, immediately when it is terminated in the control room, you can go to youtube.com, open that up, and then go to Tantalk Radio /Go Yard, the name of this show, and you're going to see some shows there, and you'll actually see us in the studio if you watch them on YouTube. So there's a lot of ways. When we first started the show, we only had the podcast thing that we could do, right?
We did.
Come a long way. Facebook, YouTube.
I know, right? We really have come a long way.
Got them all. And why would we even encourage listeners to know where to go find these shows?
Wow. First of all, we have a lot of topics. So, we're in our 7th year, so we've covered a lot of topics. And every topic we cover, we really take in depth. We break apart. We look at it in different angles. We give great tools, supports, and solutions. So when we did a topic, maybe it wasn't important to you because you weren't in that part of your life.
Sure.
And so it's a great resource to kind of go back if you're having to deal with something and you're feeling stuck. We probably have a show on that kind of help you out along the way.
And the only place you're going to find the titles to our shows are on our website.
Yes.
So you have to go write it down, GoYard 2014. That's the year we began. GoYard2014.org. It's an O-R-G. And then you'll be able to see the titles there for the shows.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's get into this. So, using your words, and this is handling conflict, because none of us have any conflict in our lives. We may not be able to relate to the show, Dr.
Yeah,
Angel.
I'm thinking this is going to be one of those, no, I'm just kidding. A lot of us experience all kinds of conflicts with our relationships, but most often it's because we are feeling misunderstood. Maybe we're not feeling like somebody's valuing us and loving us.
Right.
And so there's a conflict. Maybe there's just a conflict because we have different views or values in our life and
Sure.
we're not seeing eye to eye. And
Right.
what I see happen when there's conflict is we don't want to go to the person that we have the conflict with.
Right.
We want to go to everybody around that person that we have conflict with.
Isn't that because we just don't like to confront or be confronted? I think
That's true.
that is human nature, right?
I hear that all the time. I'm just not confrontational. And, and handling conflict does not necessarily
It
mean
doesn't
we
have to be
confrontational.
No, it doesn't. Explain that. Explain that.
Sure. Like when most people think of confrontational, they think of it becomes a verbal altercation and then they have
Right.
to defend themselves and it gets, heated. And we can handle conflict without ever getting heated. We can take ownership of, our feelings and what our experience is. And we can take it from a place of, I care about you. This is happening. What can we do?
Right. And don't you think that just the thought of having a difficult conversation causes a lot of people to just never have the
Yeah, they
conversation?
avoid it.
So they avoid it because they think, maybe it'll work out, Maybe they'll realize that they always leave their dirty clothes all over the house. And maybe one day they'll say, I think I'll pick up my own dirty clothes, etc. Right?
No, they think it's going to
Toothpaste
magically
all
get
over
fixed.
everywhere, etc.
Or if they ignore it, something else will happen. What happens when we ignore things that are conflicts is we're not pushing through it, we're pushing it down. And when
Right.
we push it down, then it's just going to take the little things that kind of spark us a little bit. We're a little time bomb. So we start getting
Yes.
angry and
Yes.
resentment builds and frustration builds. And it really hurts that relationship. We don't want to see that person as much, or when we're around them, we detach.
Because we are experiencing this repressed anger. I think,
yes.
and correct me if I'm wrong, doctor, because I think a lot of people think that if they just don't bring it up, it's just going to be peaceful in their house.
And it's not. It's not peaceful
But
at all.
they think it is. So
They
they
do.
think that's the way out of conflict. Just don't talk about it.
Sure, they do. They do think that, and it's not peaceful in the house because, first of all, like this thing is probably continuing to happen that is causing you to feel the way you're feeling or experience what you're experiencing, and you are internalizing it, which means that conflict brews inside your body,
Right.
and it's stirring in there, and it messes with us.
Well, let's talk about medically what happens when people just stuff their feelings. We've talked about this a lot
do.
on Go Yard because Go Yard means hitting a home run. And by the way, the Rays, we're proud of them. They came through to the 6th game. It was fantastic. And next year.
Yep.
But we're excited. They did really well. So still go Rays. That's how we feel.
Yes.
But anyway, Go Yard means hitting a home run, which means going above the norm, right?
Exactly.
A home run is the best you can get, you know,
Sure.
when you hit it out of the park, right? And so, but a lot of times people feel like they will settle. I guess that's what I want to say. They settle for a false peace in the house because nobody's screaming today. Wow, nobody's screaming today, right?
Sure.
Right?
But we have this kind of proverbial elephant in the room when we have this unsettled conflict, and
Right.
if it's something that's impacting you, like when we stuff it and internalize, what's happening is we're taking feelings of hurt or disappointment or whatever this conflict is brewing, and we're pushing them down inside of us. And so when we do that, we overeat, undereat, get restless sleep. A lot of times we have all kinds of digestion issue, and long term that impacts us physically. We'll get sick. Our immune system starts to break down. We might, have all kinds of other things. There's a whole list of health issues the more we stuff that on a physical level and a medical level, but then on a mental health level,
Yeah, right.
like it interacts. So we start to feel depressed, we start to feel anxious, we start to feel like a lot of struggles, and that doesn't just happen in that one relationship that we experience this conflict. It branches everywhere.
It branches out, doesn't it?
Yes.
My son and daughter-in-law have a new little footstool that they bought last year, and it's really cute. It almost looks like a pumpkin, but it's not. It's leather. It's really pretty. And they said, "What do you think's inside that?" And I said, "Well, I don't know what's inside stuffing of a footstool." And they said, "Well, it comes in a little package this big. It's just the outer thing. Then you take all the old sheets, towels, things that you don't like, clothes that you want to get rid of, and you stuff them in this thing. And it creates this. The more you put in there, the nicer little thing. So on the outside, it looks great. But if you were to open it up, it's old ragged sheets. It's dirty. Not dirty, but old towels. It's not pretty on the inside. Right? Mm-hmm. And I was just thinking about that footstool right now, because that is kind of a metaphor of what happens. A lot of times we look pretty on the outside.
Sure do.
But we've stuffed all this, and it's there. It's somewhere.
Yes, it is. And it's impacting us. So I think a lot of us walk thinking that if we're not dealing with it, we could just ignore it, move forward, try to, do good or whatever, that it's just going to go away magically. It's not. It's inside, and it's venom. We've talked about the venom that this causes. It rots us from the inside out in so many ways. And I love that metaphor, by the way, because that's really
There's
telling,
a name for that little footstool. I'm going to ask my daughter-in-law. I forget what it's called, but it's really a cool
But that's
little thing.
what happens to us. And so we need, dealing with the conflict in our life doesn't mean we have to yell or scream or have these verbal altercations or get defensive or, we can just sit down and share our hearts in an open way and an honest way.
Now, I agree with that, but I will say from experience as a pastor many years that the longer that stuff is stuffed, the harder it is just to sit down and have a normal conversation. A period of time, let's say you've been married 40 years and you've never ever had a good, frank discussion, right? It's going to be so...
Well, yes, because it's kind of like, ooh, we've let the lid off of the Pandora's box.
Right, yeah.
But it doesn't mean we still can't do it. We do. There's strong feelings in there, but I think what keeps us from having these conversations is more of the fear. How's it going to be received?
Right.
And a lot of people are afraid, like, if I tell this person, like, I need this, maybe they'll tell me I'm too needy and they don't want me in their life. Like, there's all kinds of things that motivate behind this. But it's how we approach and what we do with it that makes the difference.
Okay. We're going to do a show next week called Blindsided, right? Because a lot of times, this kind of goes with this, because a lot of times we get too easy, too quick, let's say, into a relationship, too serious, get married quickly, or whatever the case may be. Don't really know that person, and we haven't built up that trust of communication. You want to talk about trust of communication,
Sure.
where you can really trust that, like I know, because I've known you for many years, I can say anything to you. I can say, hey, you know what? I didn't like what you said on blah, blah. I can do that. We can communicate like that. But in particular relationships where they live together, that can really be a tough thing for a lot of people.
Sure. I mean, that trusted communication is an important foundation to any kind of relationship in our life. And the closer that, more important that relationship is, obviously, the better we want to build that trust. And so what happens is I communicate something to you, and then you respond in a way that's supportive or healthy or in some way that I, feel heard and valued. and it may be, we an honest, and then we grow that new depth, and then we share another thing, and then maybe you share something back, and like that's how that grows.
It's a process. That's what you're saying. You're talking about the ideal situation, right? This is how it should work.
Yes, and it should be, should is the operative word. I'm catching that. But it's based on the type of relationship I have. Like when we first met, we weren't sharing like intimate struggles or feelings or details of our lives or our families or our kids. It was more surface stuff, getting
Sure.
because that was the level of trust the relationship had, right? And so as we build that trust with somebody, of course we can go more personal with that because it's at that level. The problem is so many people, like they couple up with somebody or they get a new friend and they're like airing all the dirty, deep secrets and dirty laundry and fears and anxieties. And like this person hasn't earned it. They don't know what, maybe, they're out there telling other people or.
Exactly. Okay. So I want to bring this down to the dating world right now that is happening in a lot of situations because I hear it from this one, that one, whatever. They're online. Look at Mr. Wonderful. Isn't he cute? He's amazing. And within a day or so, they're on the phone with Mr. Wonderful, and who knows if they're each telling the truth. I mean, that's always something, right, at the beginning. But I know people that are very quick to tell way too much.
Oh, yes.
What's wrong with that?
First of all, that person hasn't earned that level of trust. And so, I mean, it would be like, okay, let's put it in the physical sense. When we do that, it's like giving somebody your debit card that you met off the street. You give them access to your whole bank account.
Yes.
Have they earned that? No. They could go wipe out your bank account, right?
That's exactly right.
That's what we're doing when we're doing that. It's like we're giving them access to our full bank account. We're giving them access to our full emotional account without them earning that level of trust. First, you're going to trust them with $1 or maybe $10, and then if they've shown that they can handle that, we'll give them a little more. Right in the physical, well, but we're not doing that in the emotional.
Okay, so this thing of dating online, right? Okay, it goes along with this whole topic of handling conflict because there has to be a process of getting to know somebody. Let's say somebody you work with at work, and you start telling them all this stuff, and then pretty soon you hear in the break room that they've just told 5 friends about your whatever, your situation with your husband or whatever the case may be, right? But you didn't take enough time being the operative word here, to really get to know someone. And therefore, a lot of times, I'm just going to throw this out and you tell me what you think. A lot of times, we self-sabotage relationships, whether that be friendships, dating things, whatever, working, whatever, because the time factor, we've just rushed into it.
Yes.
We just like, oh my gosh, he's so cute. Oh my, he's just so wonderful. Ah. Right?
We go
and pretty soon, you're like,
no, they're not. Or they've taken advantage, or they've shared your information to places that shouldn't have gone, or they've done...
This stuff happens.
Right. Or they've dropped you and moved on to someone else, or it does. It happens very, very frequently. I hear it all the time in the counseling room. And that's that building that level of trust. It is starting with small things and building that time, and slowly bring in that relationship. I tell people all the time, slow it down. Real relationships take time. If it's friendships, if it's romantic, it doesn't matter. Like those coworkers, like they still take time.
Okay. So I'm going to make a recommendation to our listeners because I know some people that I am close to that have made serious mistakes in jumping too quick. And what I'm trying to say, and you can tell me if you agree or not, is when you jump too quick and you're in a friendship, a relationship, whatever the case may be, then you haven't learned how to really communicate. So therefore, this handling conflict using your words is going to be a lot harder for you than the average person who maybe takes longer.
Sure.
Right?
Because when we take longer, we're building up those communication skills. We get to know that person. As we're building the trust, we know who they are. We know how they react. We know what they value. We know their values. We get to know that. And so we can communicate those things. So when I'm feeling like my feelings are hurt or I'm not feeling valued or loved, I can bring that and say, I feel hurt because, you didn't answer my text message in 2 days. Like, we can have that conversation and then we can deal with that conflict. And it wasn't a fight. It's not a blow up. We dealt with it and now we move on. We're not building resentment. We're not in our mind going, oh my gosh, are they out there, dating 5 other people because they didn't answer my, like, people go to the worst case scenario when things like that happen, but that's because they don't have the trust built.
That's because there's no foundation.
There's no foundation.
Okay, so I want to bring up 2 points, and one of them, let's talk about it before the break, is texting. Because, I text a lot for business and everything. But when it comes to you trying to establish a meaningful relationship, whether it be a friendship, a work relationship, or a personal relationship, texting can be misunderstood. Tone of voice, we've talked about this many times, but I know of a situation this week. So texting can really get you into trouble. Would you address this, Dr. Angel?
It sure can, because, we've mentioned it, I don't even know how many times, but so many times that when we are just using the written word, we're using 7% of our total communication. So they're missing the tone and the body language and the inflections in our voice. And those are important parts of our message. And so we usually read messages with whatever we're thinking or feeling at the time, which may or may not be accurate, which is where there's so much miscommunication happening.
Okay, so let me throw a question at you for our listeners. What's wrong with somebody meeting somebody on a dating app? They've texted and texted, and they go out to dinner, and within 2 days, they're like totally really involved, in bed with each other, all that stuff. What's wrong with that?
They haven't built any trust. There's no depth to it. And it's most likely it's going to end very quickly because there's no depth.
There's no depth to it. There's no depth to the relationship. So how can you learn to use your words and handle conflict when you don't really know this person?
You don't know the person.
Because that's not even a honeymoon stage. It's prior to a honeymoon stage, just a getting to know you for the first time stage, right?
Right. And like I said earlier, would you meet somebody, have one dinner with them, and hand them over the passwords to all your bank accounts or your debit card?
And the answer to that, sadly, in America, I don't know about other countries, is too many do that very thing.
And then when somebody steals or wipes them out, they're all surprised.
Yes.
And that's why we have to stop and build that trusted relationship.
We have to. And while we're on that, before we go to break, there are scammers out there, people. There are scammers in the dating world. There are scammers that will call you and tell you that you're in trouble with the IRS.
Oh, yeah.
There's all kinds of scamming going on. Don't fall for it. Take a number, take their phone number, whatever, but do not give them your information, your social security number. Do not give them your debit card number. Do not give them your age. Do not give them your full name. Do not give them your address. Why am I saying this? Because I know somebody dear to me that this just happened to a couple weeks ago, and it was really bad.
And it happens all the time.
Money was lost. Yes. And then somebody has that social security number and that information.
Mm-hmm.
So my point here, before we go to break, I just keep wanting to make one more point.
One more.
Is that don't be embarrassed to say, no, I barely know you. No, I'm not giving you any information. You send me. Somebody called me this week, something similar. Oh, blah, 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 and they said, so, that'll only cost you. And I said, whoa, you send me an email. Well, you say you have my email information. All that. Go ahead and send me an email with all that information that you just said. Never got anything.
Of course not.
Of course, it's a scam. To break and don't go anywhere using your words, handling conflict.
entertaining and informative radio for the Sunshine State.
Dr. Angel Falzoni specializes in a variety of therapeutic areas, including trauma, depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, stress management, self-esteem, interpersonal relationships, ADHD, behavioral addictions, as well as spirituality issues. A Florida native, she holds multiple degrees, including a bachelor's in education and philosophy, a master's of arts in professional counseling and marriage and family therapy, and a PhD in psychology. Dr. Angel is also a Florida licensed mental health counselor. She has worked with youth and adolescents for 14 plus years and has worked extensively in women's mental health for the past 6 years. She has worked in agencies providing mental health services to family and youth at high risk. Dr. Angel is an accomplished psychotherapist who works with children, teens, adults, couples, and families. Dr. Angel has advanced training and experience in working with LGBTQ specific individuals and issues. Dr. Angel can help you. Just call for an appointment at 727-501-6557 or online at drangelsdevelopment.com. Dr. Angel Falzoni, support for individuals, couples, and families. 727-501-6557.
Prompt professional service is what you will receive when you allow Marcia McAllister of Charles Rittenberg Realty to help find that perfect home or list your home for sale. With over 23 years of experience in the Tampa Bay area, you will enjoy a smooth transaction from start to finish. Call Marcia today at 727-417-0707. Now is a great time to buy or sell a home. Call Marcia McAllister at 727-417-0707.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
All right, we are back.
We are back.
We're on the last part of this series, using your words. Tonight, handling conflict.
Yes.
Yes.
And so when we talked about, with handling conflict, we talked about people who avoid handling conflict.
Right.
There's also, there are people who are accommodating, which is another way to handle conflict, which means they're people pleasing. They just want to give
Right.
in to accommodate
Absolutely.
so that we don't have the conflict.
Right.
So we're people pleasing. And again, we're building up that resentment. We still have those
Right.
feelings, but we're constantly giving in when we're accommodating. So it's another way people try to handle conflict. It does not work.
Okay.
But those are the marriages that I usually see. They'll be married for 30 years and all of a sudden everything looks great on the surface, and then you hear they're getting a divorce and everyone's like, what happened? They've never fought before. Well, that's because one person has always given in, and then they realize, I'm done with that.
Right.
So that's another negative way. And then there's the competing way.
Right.
So the competing way when we have conflict is I am going to get my way no matter what happens to the other person.
Right.
And that's a negative way of trying to deal with the conflict. So kind of very selfish, very self-interest, and not thinking about someone else. So when we're talking about using our words with conflict, we're looking at either collaborating and problem solving. I'm using my words. I'm going to bring this to the table. Let's collaborate. What's a way we can handle this? Or
That's good.
maybe the other person didn't even realize you were feeling this way. And so that's a collaboration, right?
Right.
That I value the relationship, but I also want to have resolution. We don't want to keep this conflict alive, right?
Right.
And you can only collaborate with the person you're in the conflict with.
Right. But
That's important.
That's important because a lot of people will tell friends and hope it gets back to that person, right? Or
of course,
a
they
relative.
send these passive
and-
messages.
Right. Or just kind of act funny and go silent, correct?
Mm-hmm. And they should just know. Or fine. You hear the word fine all the time. I'm fine.
Right.
No, they're not. Let's find a way to collaborate and come together and put our words to what's happening in this
Right.
conflict. And it doesn't have to come across accusatory. It doesn't have to come across in a verbal altercation. When we meet in collaboration, that means I am not putting these feelings out with it. I'm going to settle myself
Right.
And we're coming to like, let's look at this conflict.
So you have to learn to keep yourself calm if you're going to really have a productive discussion when you're collaborating on issues in the relationship, right?
Oh, absolutely. So anytime we feel triggered, that is not the problem. That's not the time to deal with a conflict.
Explain feeling triggered.
Ooh, that's a really abstract concept. But when you feel strong emotions,
Okay,
coming
strong
on,
emotions,
when you
right?
feel that strong emotion,
you could
if
fly
it's
off the
hurt,
handle.
if it's anger, if it's frustration, whatever it is, that's that trigger point. Like, that's not when we're going to deal with any conflict. Well, at least we're not going to solve anything
We're not gonna
effectively.
solve anything,
We'll
right.
make it worse.
Right.
And that's where we get the loud and the verbal altercations happening when people are in that moment and they're trying to deal with it, and then they blow the top, right?
And some people resort to throwing things, breaking things.
Oh, sure. It happens in all
that
kinds
kind
of
of
ways
stuff.
when blowing the top, or just taking off and disappearing for days on end. Like,
Right.
I've
Or
heard,
not talking for weeks.
yeah, just
don't
shutting it
talk.
down.
Just don't talk.
And so when we are feeling those strong emotions, that's not the time to deal with the conflict. We need to kind of settle ourselves for a minute.
Right.
And then when we're dealing with the conflict, it's bringing this to the table so that we can look at it. Like I said, a lot of times the other person may not even realize what you are feeling or what that's like for you. And maybe they didn't know when they didn't answer your text for 2 days how hurt that made you feel. Maybe
Right.
they were just really busy and they're not a great texter. Like, I know I'm not a great texter. I'm not a great texter. Like, I don't keep my phone leashed to me. And I know there are certain people that are very sensitive about if I do not answer their text. So I really try for those people to answer their text quicker.
Right. Yeah.
You know, because I don't want to send the message I don't care.
Sure. But
And
you're
now
busy.
that I know that they feel that way, I don't want to do that. So I try not to. So, but I wouldn't have known that if we didn't have that conversation.
Right.
So that's what I'm meaning by collaboration.
And that's exactly ideal. This is what we're supposed to be doing.
Well, it's a win-win.
So,
I mean, there's two win-wins to
Go
dealing
ahead.
with conflict.
Go ahead.
Dealing with conflict: collaboration and compromise. Those are always
okay,
win-win.
those are great. Collaboration and compromise. I like that.
Compromise is when I give up something, you give up something, and we kind of find a middle ground that we can both agree on.
Okay, so what happens when you get to a point in a relationship where you haven't been practicing those two C words, collaboration and compromise, and instead you have thrown caution to the wind, and now you are just having these blow-ups that are just crazy, right? And everybody's screaming and yelling and whatever, and so things just go downhill. Can those relationships be saved? Can they be fixed?
Ooh, you're asking a very generalized
Well,
question.
I'm asking a person who, it is a generalized question, but a person who's in the counseling room 12 hours a day. And I kind of venture to bet you have some of those kind of people walking in the door.
I do, and that's the key. The people that come into the counseling room, like at that point, we usually
Want help.
They need help. They need a third-party intervention.
Yes.
But it's what's motivating that help. So what I'll see, somebody will want to come into the counseling room so that they can prove that the other person is all wrong.
Oh, yeah.
That
yeah.
is not
They want
working
somebody to
through
side with
conflict.
them, right?
Or needing someone to give them permission to, like, oh, you're being, you're everything's so bad, you need to walk away. They're looking for permission. Like, that's not working through conflict. So if we have,
But some therapists, they do that in error, right? They side
you
and
should not
try
be
to,
siding.
right?
right, and it's not about giving someone permission. Like, people have to come to things on their own
On their
terms.
own.
But when I get two people come into the counseling room and they can have a long time of a conflictual relationship, if they really want to work on it, then we work on it, and it can very much turn around and become a really great, healthy relationship.
It can.
It absolutely can. And I had
agree.
one case that, like, it was literally like 10 years. This marriage was like all this. One person was the avoider, the other one was the competitor, where they got their way all the way, and the other one just avoided everything for 10 years.
Wow.
So then she just leaves. She just left. She just walked out the door and left. And she separated. And a couple months later, she's like, I need to come in. So she came in from counseling on individual. And then after about 5 months, she brought him in, and they decided, we want to make this work. We have kids. I love them. I want to make this work. And you know what? They did. After a year they worked for a good year together and individually, and they have one of the healthiest relationships.
And that's fantastic. And that gives our listeners hope.
That
Because
right
it
there.
can happen.
Absolutely.
It really can happen.
And I know a lot of times people say, oh, well, once somebody walks out the door, all bets are off, game is over. Not always. sometimes, but not always.
Okay, let me give you a scenario of a person who is with somebody for many years, divorce or let's say death, whatever the case may be, and it was not a healthy relationship. They never learned to use their words to settle conflict. They never faced things. They just drank it away or buried it, right? Or partied it, whatever the case may be, right? And so now they are out on the dating scene. And so they are dating this one and that one. And we mentioned earlier in the first part of the show, this is a very dangerous place for a person who has not dealt with conflict, because they're going to look for the person who treats them like a queen or like a king. They're going to look for somebody that doesn't make any waves, right? Because that's all they've been. They don't want that, right?
Right,
They want calm, correct?
Absolutely, that's what they're looking for, and really what they're looking.
And that's not real.
It's not real, first of all, and we'll address that in just a second because that's not real. And usually, what they're looking for is somebody to fill what they're missing.
That's right.
That missing hole. And first of all, that's not a healthy relationship. A relationship should never be out of our deficit. Should always be out of our excess and our what we should feel complete as a person first. So when we have, I call it baggage, when we have that emotional baggage, we got to deal with our baggage.
Oh yeah.
You know, we can't keep dragging those bags into other relationships, friendships, it doesn't matter what kind, and thinking this is going to work this time.
But that's the norm. That's in my opinion. Am I
Yes.
wrong about that?
Oh, no, it is absolutely the norm.
Because people are so skittish. I don't even know how to spell that. Skittish about
Being alone.
conflict or being alone.
Conflict and being
or
alone.
both, right? So they're looking for the Prince Charming. They're looking for the perfect mate. They're looking for the person just to have fun and get drunk with. You know, they're just
the
looking
perfect
for
friend or the perfect whatever, but
Right.
the perfect. And
The
there's no
perfect,
perfect.
right?
We're human. Perfect doesn't exist.
Okay, have you ever seen the Netflix series Dirty John?
No, I have not.
Oh, you have to.
Okay.
And the reason you need to is because in your occupation, this would really, it would help you. It would really be good. So Dirty John is a, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, maybe more part series of a lady who, you know, is divorced, whatever, and then this guy, you know, they meet online, and suddenly they're meeting in a restaurant, and then that very first date, they're drunk all night long, and then blah, blah, blah. Everything proceeds. But things fall apart, and I'm not going to tell you how this ends. I'm just going to say, I think this is more common. And this person turned out, this charming doctor, turned out to not be a doctor, and I won't tell you anymore, and turned out to be not charming whatsoever.
That's usually the case.
But after so much damage had been done to this person's self-concept, their you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And because they were looking for Prince Charming, looking for the ideal, right? Mm-hmm. So I would suggest to our listeners, you can probably get it on Roku. I don't know where you can find it, but you can definitely find it on Netflix. That's where I watched it. Dirty John. It's an amazing series that will give you some real insight into what to be careful about.
Absolutely, and that's where we have to build that trust.
Yes.
Right?
And there was no, oh no, I mean, it was suddenly, boom, they're right in a relationship, right?
Right.
It's
So,
just
like,
quick.
First of all, we have to use our words to build trust because we
Right.
have to have real conversations. We have, but at the level of trust it's earned, and time happens there as we're building. And then conflict is always going to happen with any relationship. There
It
is
is.
no relationship free of conflict. And if you tell me you don't have conflict in your relationship, first of all, you're a liar because you do. Either you're avoiding it or you are accommodating it, but you do.
Okay, at pastoring 40 some years, I have heard not a lot of people, but here and there, I hear a married couple say, "We've never fought once. We have never had a cross word. He's never yelled at me." She says, "And I've never yelled, you know, blah blah blah." That is highly suspect, is it not?
Absolutely not, which tells me you're avoiding or you're accommodating because
Right.
conflict is there. It's
Avoiding
always there.
or accommodating. People,
Yes.
we need to write those words down. This is what a lot of people do. This is how they get through their relationships.
Because
Avoiding
all
or
relationships
accommodating.
are going to have some kind of conflict, and then we're going to have to settle that and deal with it at some level.
And conflict, just the word, does not mean that it's some major deal. It could be as
No.
little as You know, it'd really be nice if once in a while you pick up your own dishes off the table and take them over to the dishwasher and wash them
Sure.
off, put them in.
Sure.
We teach our kids to do that. Why can't you?
Sure.
You know, right? That kind of stuff.
And it could be something like, knowing that one person may like a certain food type, the other person might hate that food type, and we're always going to the type of food I hate. Like, that can be a conflict because, like, I'm feeling like what I want and need never happens, and we always meet your needs. So, like, those are conflicts, even though
Exactly.
they don't have to be a fight. And I
Right.
think that's it. We get this mental image of conflict means this big fight. Conflicts can just
Exactly. Yes. The word conflict is used like for wars and
Sure.
this conflict, whatever. It's usually that word makes you feel like it's really major,
But
right?
usually anything that kind of stirs like a negative feeling inside of us, there's some kind of conflict happening.
Right.
If it's a values conflict, if it's I'm not
What's
feeling,
a values conflict?
well, everyone has a different set of values. Oh, like I deal with this a lot in the marriage and family counseling, where one parent, values that the kids, do their chores, they listen on the first time and they get a consequence, where the other parent, they want to they're passive about it. They don't want to give the kids consequences because they want, to
Right.
discuss things through or analyze it in a different way. Well, that's a values conflict, right? But it's still a conflict, and it's going to hurt that family if we don't
Right.
deal with that conflict. And so it doesn't mean it's a fight. It doesn't mean it's any of that stuff. It means that I'm feeling something in me that feels off. If it's a feeling that I feel hurt, or I feel not heard, or we have some values issues, or something is just stirring in me in a negative way, there's something on that's a conflict for us.
So we need to be aware of what we're feeling, right? And when we're feeling that, that didn't feel right,
Right.
that exchange of information with a friend or a spouse or whatever, that's like a trigger. Like,
Exactly.
What's that about? Why did that bother me?
And so it's usually when, all right, so here, this might be a little complicated to try and say on the radio, but what I have found when people are feeling the behavior we look for is that you negatively use the way you like to get loved.
Okay.
For example,
Okay.
we talk about there's 5 love languages.
5 love
so
languages.
if words mean a lot to you, when you feel stirred, you want to give negative words
Oh.
because something stirred you. If you're a person that does things, helps, acts of service and helps people, when you feel stirred, you don't want to do anything for that person.
That's interesting.
Right? So it's
Yeah,
the
never
negative.
thought about it that
yes,
way.
that's how you know you are. If you're a person that likes physical touch and you feel stirred, you're rigid, you're stiff. You don't want no one to hold your hand or rub you
Yeah,
or touch you in
right,
any way.
yeah.
And so that's usually
That's interesting.
it's a good barometer to knowing when that's starting to get stirred.
So what are the 5 love languages?
So physical touch, acts of service, words of affirmation.
Acts of service.
Acts of service.
Go ahead.
Words of affirmation, and spending quality time.
Okay. So then if you're really hurt, what you're going to do is you're going to withhold those things from the
or
other
use
person.
them in a negative way. Yes.
Or use them in a negative way. Okay, so how does that cause problems in a relationship?
Oh, it causes a lot of problems in a relationship because now we have this negative messages and all this undercurrent of hurt and negativity, and we have a conflict, and we're not talking about it. We're just acting in it.
We're just finding ourselves there.
Right. And so you find yourself, if words are your thing and you're using them negatively, you're using words that are hurting someone else's feelings or putting down the relationship or putting down the person constantly, you're becoming this negative person with
And-
that relationship.
And what it does is really backfire on you because
Absolutely.
then that person's not going to want to give you what you need, which is kind words.
Which is words.
right.
Because they're hearing your negative words, and that's, taking down. So it starts to rip these relationships up.
Are very many people aware of this?
Phenomenon.
Yeah, subconscious
are not.
interaction.
They are not. But I will tell you, I see it every single time. I can pick out their love languages just by how they respond when they're feeling hurt.
Okay. So when you're feeling hurt, dear ones, how do you respond to that person in your personal life, or your best friend, or your mother, or whoever? How do you respond to that person
Right.
when they've hurt you? That's a tell.
That's very telling. And when you're doing that, that means you have a conflict. Something isn't feeling right for you. And it may be a communication conflict. It may be that we just need to communicate.
Okay, so let's say that's the fix, to sit and communicate. And this whole show is about handling conflict. But people can be, what's the word? I'm thinking about a couple scenes in this movie, Dirty John, where he was such a schmoozer. You know what I mean? He could say exactly what you wanted to hear. But he really, that really never solved the problem. The problem was still there. But he knew how to manipulate.
Sure.
He knew how to, turn things to get what he wanted.
But see, and that's why time is so important in those types of relationships, because
Yes,
people
back to
who
that. We're
can
coming back full
manipulate,
circle.
People who are schmoozers,
Yeah.
smooth talkers, like they can do that for a period of time, but it shows with time.
It shows with
true
time.
colors always show
It always
in
does.
time. They can't keep up that act.
And so the person out there that says, "Oh, I just met the love of my life. When did you meet him? Saturday. Oh my gosh," and blah 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 blah. Okay, that's not gonna work, right?
No,
You
that's not
have
how it
got
works.
to slow down.
Well, and you know what? And I think it boils down to we don't value ourselves. Because if we valued ourselves,
Right.
we would have the confidence to know, like, we deserve to have a quality person in our life. And they may be quality, they may not, but we don't know that in a week or 2
Okay.
days or 2 months.
So how many times parents of teens, because we've been parents of teens, right? And you see one of your kids dating somebody and getting very serious very quick, right? And they're teens. They don't really know. Shouldn't a parent sit down and say, this has got to slow down for this reason and this reason, this
Oh,
reason?
absolutely. Absolutely.
And not avoid the conversation because we don't want to make Sissy mad or whatever the case may be, right?
Oh, no. I've actually had to have that conversation with my boys where I'm like, okay, you know what? You guys have seen each other the last couple of days. You need to take a couple days break and you need to go hang out with your friends or go do this or take care of stuff
And it's
around the
easier
house.
to handle that when it's your kids, obviously. But when it's your friend, but again, should we be more helpful with friends or adult children when we say, you just got divorced and now you're doing this? Well, be careful, slow down.
Well, and talking in the way of sharing our heart in a humble way, and so it's not coming across like I'm
Right.
trying to tell you what to
Yes.
do or
Yes.
micromanage your life, but
Right.
it's out of concern for you.
Right.
But we need to have honest conversations, and people avoid it. And everyone at the end, when it breaks up, oh, I knew that wasn't going to last. I saw that from the beginning. And you're like, but you never said anything to me, right?
Are you saying we have responsibility to speak
I
truth
think
to
we
people,
have responsibility
friends,
to
and
speak truth to our friends, not in a judgmental way, not in a critical way, in a humble, caring, loving way. Yes.
Really? Well, if it makes them mad, they won't talk to us.
Well, then that happens, but that doesn't mean that means we don't have a very healthy friendship or relationship with that person if that's the reaction. Because if we're taking it humbly and we're taking it loving and we're laying our concerns, they may choose to yield to them, they may choose to ignore them, but at least we took the responsibility of trying to share something that could.
I've been in situations where a friend would call me and say, could you drive me to this place? I'm meeting this guy for a date, first date. And sure, I'll be happy to drop you off. Because they didn't want to drive home because they anticipated they would be drinking, right? And this happened to me recently. And I said to this person, do you know this guy that you met online? Do you know his name, his last name? No. What do you know about him? Well, I saw him and we had lunch. Okay. Do you know anything about him, basically? But in particular, do you know his name, for heaven's sake, right? And I'm driving in the car and this person says, well, he told me online his name was this. And today at lunch, he said, that's really not my name. It's this. Now, how would you even know that the second choice is the real name? Do you know what I'm saying?
I absolutely know what you're saying.
And I'm on this kick right now because
I hear you.
I know people in my life that, to me, are making dangerous choices.
Sure.
Right? And are putting themselves at risk
Sure.
because of the rush because of the rushing to have something that they think they can have.
Sure. And a lot of people, I hear this all the time in the room. And, and our responsibility is to share our heart honestly and lovingly, but what they do with that information
But what they
is their
do,
ownership
that's
of it.
exactly right. That's exactly right.
Absolutely.
So in that regard, we can't make them do something, but we can lovingly suggest, why don't you have some dates in public places first before
right.
you...
Lovingly make a suggestion or have an open conversation.
Right.
Or share our concerns.
We've got 2 minutes. You have 2 minutes to sum all this show up, and I'm sure we're going to return to this subject at some point, but this is going to finish this series using your words. So sum it up, Dr.
Well, let's sum it up. So let's talk about using our words. When we experience conflict, and we do experience conflict in our relationships, we need to use our words. The communication is key to getting through conflict. So we do not want to avoid the conflict. We do not want to accommodate the conflict and let it go. And we do not want to be that person that's competing and selfish and it's always my way or no way, because that's not a healthy way of working with our relationships. We want to do it healthy. We want to collaborate and we want to compromise. And that all involves using our words and having those real, honest, authentic conversations and building the trust in our relationships.
And what if, when we try that in good faith, the response we get is very negative, anger, perhaps they break up with you, whatever the case may be? What happens then if you don't get a good, mature response?
Well, then this is not a healthy relationship, and so then you have some choices to make.
Right.
We can't control that, but doesn't mean we don't handle it healthy because we're afraid of the negative response.
Because it's going to come back to
It
bite
just
you
gets
later.
worse later on,
right?
yes.
It's not going to go away. It's going to. Wow. We welcome your comments. A few of you have put some things on our Facebook post, and you can contact us anytime. Dr. Angel at 727-501-6557 for counseling appointments. And we have a 3 o'clock Sunday afternoon show all about practical Christian living. I have that show every Sunday afternoon with some of our radio team members right here on this station, 3 o'clock. So don't forget that show, Living the Good Life. And we're glad that you listened to Go Yard and come back and see us again on our show. Do you have anything else? You got
No.
5 seconds. Who
This
are
has been
you?
Dr. Angel.
Okay, we got that in. I'm Mama Mac, and we'll see you next week on Go Yard. See ya.
Good night.
WTA